Okay, we now welcome back onto the show Renee Gorman, National Manager of Generation Liberty. Renee, welcome back.
Thanks for having me on again.
Now, we've got a lot to talk to you about because last week was the release of your big report on freedom of speech crisis at Australian universities, and there's a lot of statistics that are coming out. There was a whole lot of coverage about your report that we want to talk to you about, and there's also a video, and I think we're just going to play, just to get people listening and people watching on YouTube into the frame of mind, we'll just play a little snippet of the video before we get into it.
Chuck it on.
The IPA commissioned a survey of 500 Australian students asking what they thought about the state of free speech at their universities. And the results are damning. 41% of students feel that they are sometimes unable to express their opinion at university. And 31% said that they have been made to feel uncomfortable by a university teacher for expressing their opinion.
So that's some pretty amazing statistics, and we're going to get into those statistics and a few others as well that really caught our attention coming out of that report. But I guess we want to start at the beginning would be a pretty good place to start. Great. So when we're thinking about putting this report together, what were you hoping to find? Or what did you want to know?
So really why I was passionate about this research in particular was as someone who was a student who faced censorship, who had attempts to have events shut down and had gone through this, it was so frustrating to continuously see vice chancellors and bureaucrats come forward and say, no, there's no free speech crisis, nothing to see here, it's all fine. And I kept thinking, well, from what authority do you say that? Because you haven't actually spoken to the students about this. Have you ever heard about a vice chancellor going to meet with a group who's had their event shut down or had an event have massive security fees? There didn't seem to be any desire.
Yeah, I haven't heard that story, but I've heard a lot of them burying it under the rug, I think would be the accepted phrase. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I actually asked for an audience with Michael Spence to discuss the Unlearn program and certain things that I was concerned about while I was a student. And he said to me that he had no free space in his diary for the entire semester. So
wow, busy guy.
That's a very, very busy man. He seems to be more busy than many ministers. So that's an interesting little tidbit there. But yeah, it was really frustrating to see that they weren't actually talking to the students. And what I think this research, more than anything, highlights is this massive, massive disconnection between what vice chancellors are saying is happening on campus and what the students are actually experiencing. And we keep joking that this is quite a novel or radical approach by the IPA to actually ask the students what they thought about free speech. And I think it's kind of crazy that we had to be the first people to do that, though we are the great thinkers of Australian society, so we did it first. But
it's a special level of genius to come up with asking someone a question.
Yeah. To talk to the students about the student free speech crisis.
Yeah.
Radical idea there. But yeah, I think that's one of the main findings, I think, is that what the kind of higher up elitists are saying is not really what the students are experiencing.
It's good to see Michael Spence working so hard. That's fantastic. But so does this match what you've been told by students? And as you said, it matched what you experienced when you were at uni? Because this happened to you as well, didn't it?
Yeah, I think it does really match what I hear when I go and talk to students on campus, especially conservative students feeling that they can't discuss certain issues and that certain issues can't even be talked about because even questioning the assumed knowledge is offensive. But the interesting thing about these findings is it was reasonably bipartisan. So most of the students surveyed were actually Greens or Labor voters, and they also thought there was a problem. So this has gone beyond what a lot of chancellors have been claiming, which is, this is just an issue for conservative students. They're making a mountain out of a molehill. They're taking small instances and saying that this is a massive issue, when that's not true, obviously, because Green students also think that there's an issue.
So I think I did notice that on the survey it said 2% of students said that, that disagree with the idea that you should be exposed to different views. Is that this activist class that are sort of maybe ruining it for the rest of them? Because you said, that ALP and Greens people also have the same feeling. So is it just this tiny minority that's ruining it for everyone else, for want of a bit of a phrase?
Yeah, I would say that 2% is kind of representative of that radical activist portion of the university, which has a large amount of control over the culture and the discourse that happens on universities. And they've kind of been handed that control, I think, by the administration.
Yeah, so we've got all of these infographics and a lot of the statistics all over our Facebook page and all over our website. One of the statistics that I found really interesting is that students are more likely to be held back from expressing their views by other students rather than teachers. I don't see an easy fix to that. Like teachers, you can say, okay, well, don't show your bias in classes and hopefully that'll rule it out. But if people are held back by other students, I don't quite see how to overcome that.
Well, I think that's going back to kind of what I was saying before. It's that 2% of kind of radical students have been empowered by an administration that lets them get away with pretty much murder. Not literal murder, but,
I think literal murder.
A little bit, not literal murder, but lets them get away with things that a conservative student group or any other student group really couldn't get away with. We're in a situation where the maniacs are running the asylum. And I think that also reflects on the bipartisan nature of this, because these radical students are so far off the deep end that not even Greens and Labor students agree with them. You've gone so just, completely off the edge that we can't even agree with you on this.
So you reckon if this 2% aren't as empowered in future, like if we did this survey 5 years from now, we might see students are more likely to open up in front of their classmates about their own political views?
Yeah, I think so. And I think
like
the reason...
that appetite's there.
The appetite's definitely there, and that was shown by the responses we got to the social media questions. So students are much more comfortable expressing their views on social media than in class. And anyone who's been on social media lately knows that social media isn't necessarily a platform that's immune from criticism.
Yeah.
You're definitely opening yourself up. So it's not that necessarily students are afraid of their ideas being critiqued, it's how they're critiqued and the threat of being harassed. I've seen these radical students hunt down certain people who are, there was a girl who was at a charity booth getting screamed at by the women's collective with a megaphone. It's pretty harsh consequences.
Yeah, that was to me the most concerning thing was people more willing to tell their political views to complete strangers that they've never met before than they are to people they see every week. That's how toxic it can get, is just that level of disconnect.
Yeah.
I would say, look, far better for me to sermonise, James. I don't like to sermonise.
No, you've never sermonised a day in your life.
But Dave Rubin used to say, one of his things out of that interview was just be a little bit more brave and you'll find that more people agree with you than you think. So I guess if you're a uni student and you're concerned that your peers don't agree with you, if you speak up, I think you might find that more people agree with you than you think.
I totally agree, Pete, and it's something I always say.
Well, that's a good example right there. Pete said it's something he believed and then found out that Renee agreed with him.
And Renee is,
it works in lifetime.
I always say that to young students when I meet them, because when they do say they're too scared to speak out, I'm like, you're going to have to, because you don't know how many other students are sitting in that room who are also thinking the same thing, who are also too scared. So once one person says it, another person will say it. And it's how I met my best friends at uni, by them coming up to me afterwards and being like, I kind of agreed with what you said there.
Awesome.
That's how we got you to the IPA, because you were just a famous rebel rouser from the University of Sydney.
Yes, definitely.
Rebel
rouser. They looked at
it. That was a business card.
They were watching the television. They said that, emotionally unstable troublemaker, definitely IPA material.
Well, let's run some other statistics here. So 58% of students say they are more exposed to new ideas on social media than university. I couple that with 47% saying that they're more comfortable expressing themselves on social media, as we've said, and 45% saying social media is more persuasive than universities. So are universities still a thing 20 years from now? If that level of students are like, I'm learning more, I'm engaging more in debate, I'm being exposed to new ideas more in the comfort of my own home, on my laptop and on my phone on the train than I am at the university that I pay money to go to. What happens to the future of universities if that keeps up?
I think they are losing their relevance, and they're losing their relevance because of issues like this. And Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot. He really thinks that the future is going digital. It's going to private platforms creating their own education models. Universities have served us well in the past, but if they're going to continue down this route of censorship and also lack of intellectual diversity, lack of different ideas, then they're going to completely lose their relevance within society.
Okay, now you were with Adam Schlicht, a friend of the show and rock star, who went out to Melbourne University a couple of weeks ago to speak to students about freedom of speech. Let's play that footage now.
Do you feel free to express your mind in tutes? To a certain extent. I think it's the way you express yourself and certain values that go, maybe against tutorial, the tutor, or like what the university's beliefs are?
Well, certainly I might say that free speech is something that's often talked about and encouraged as being available on campus. I'd say there are certain limits to what is actually allowed to be spoken.
Especially in tutorials during a discussion where anything that doesn't sort of fit with the mainstream, ideology that's being pushed is rejected or looked down upon.
I never think that uni should be encouraging all views, but especially in arts and especially with history and politics, there's definitely a much more PC view that is encouraged among students and with teachers. So they wouldn't deliberately make you stop talking, but they would definitely try to drown you out.
Do you think you're only being taught one side of an issue in humanities classes?
Definitely. Even the lecturer themselves has the bias, and then that is of course passed down to the tutors and then further developed, but definitely not on the other side.
I definitely think so, and I think the tutes are designed in a way to guide discussion towards certain principles and ideologies and conclusions instead of facilitating a fair discussion and debate in the classroom.
We had that issue recently, I think a while back, of when the union put that thing about free speech, but they wouldn't let, some guy say what he was thinking.
But I would say that the majority of my tutorials have been rather negative in that there is a clear, agenda.
The policing of language, the insistence that some words not be used because they might not be politically correct, even if it's in the context of pursuing truth, which should be the whole point of humanities.
For politics especially, it can be very one-sided. So for last semester we were learning capitalism and we were reading Karl Marx for that, which was a bit dodgy. And for this semester as well, for our politics subjects, we definitely stick to more left-wing sources, though they do occasionally bring in some sources from other views as well. Yeah, but predominantly very one-sided.
So do you feel like some of your teachers are politically biased then?
Well, look, everyone's politically biased, aren't they? So probably, yeah.
I think some of them are. When you're brought up in an environment such as this and you're kind of indoctrinated into these values, you can only see one side of an issue and it's very tough to take a broader view.
Definitely, to the point that they mark their results according to the political standing of the student. And I've known many friends who've had that issue to the point that the lecturer themselves has been involved in a scenario like that previously and has said, yes, we know of this particular tutor and we will fix this, which is horrible. This shouldn't be a reoccurring situation.
I think that most likely more biased towards the left.
For example, in one of my tutes, it was a history tute, and it just seems like the teacher was only interested in looking at history issues through the feminist lens, the racial lens, the class lens, and it's just a very different conception of history from what I was used to, like a chronological sort of teaching of history.
All right, sweet. That was awesome. So I watched that and I just think to myself, that backs up what you've got in your report much more than it does the vice chancellors who were saying that there's no freedom of speech crisis. So you were there. What were the experiences filming that?
Yeah, it does confirm a lot of what I kind of already knew. And it's kind of worrying because you just heard very similar stories told differently by different people. And the fact that our chancellors keep denying this is such an indictment of that they don't really know what's happening at the ground level. And I think as long as they continue to deny the problem, so everyone's saying, oh, isn't it wonderful that they've been dragged kicking and screaming and they're saying, oh, we'll take on the recommendations of the French Model Code. I'm very suspicious that someone who still says that there's no problem is going to be able to fix the problem, especially since as they continue to deny it, they don't actually want to investigate the mechanisms of how censorship on campus works.
What was the reaction to your report? Was it positive, negative, mixed? I'm talking about in the wider media or maybe from vice chancellors you've heard from.
Oh, well, actually vice chancellors have been rather quiet.
Yeah.
I think
they're so busy, you said. How have they had time to read this report?
They're so busy. I think there's been a lot of criticism of, how did you get these results? Or these are just 500 of your mates that you've interviewed. And I think that's kind of a compliment thingy. I have 500 mates.
But we've been to some of your parties, Renee. They're quite something.
But, we're quite transparent. This was done by an independent data services company, and most of the students interviewed were Labor or Greens voters. So that kind of argument falls flat. But I think it's just, again, a lot of people wanting to push this issue aside, not discuss it. It's easier not to deal with it.
All right, brilliant. So Renee, thank you very much for joining us on the show. If you want to read Renee's report or see any of the infographics, make sure you're heading over to the IPA Facebook page or go to ipa.org.au. Renee, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Renee.